Hi, I'm Josh, and I have a few new-to-me games to talk about for the games that I played in July of 2025. I'm going to start, as usual, with the video games, and since I'm having ongoing computer issues, I'm having to stick with very simple games that use a very, very low amount of memory on the computer, and fortunately for me, I've been finding some really great little games. The first one I'm going to talk about is the one I put the most number of hours into. I have about 40 hours in, or at least by the end of July, I had about 40 hours into a video game called Thronefall. Thronefall is a tower defense style game, and I never really thought I would be into a tower defense game. I mean, back in the old days, I never would have thought I would be all that into real-time games in general. Being a board gamer, I figured I would lean more towards turn-based video gaming. At least back in the old days, that was my way of thinking. And also, I was wondering about the frustration of having to face hordes of enemies and replay levels if I failed and that sort of thing, because I don't have the patience to redo things over and over again. However, it turned out to be really, really fun. And here's the review that I wrote for Steam for this game. I said, a combination of very simple gameplay plus an ever-increasing variety of weapons and perks as you work through the campaign meant that I got hooked pretty quickly despite not expecting to be much of a fan of tower defense as a central mechanism. Riding that knife edge between maximizing your economic engine while keeping your military might just strong enough to take out the next wave of enemies until you can finally go nuts on buffing out your military on the last few nights, plus having to deal with a different map layout and assortment of enemies with each level, makes for a challenging and rewarding experience nearly every time. My only complaint is that the final level, a level called Totened, requires a very specific loadout on all aspects of your build-out throughout each night in order to succeed. And honestly, I had to Google how to deal with that final level because I was getting smoked every time. But other than that, this has been just an amazingly fun but extremely simple little game. I've given Thronefall a solid 9 out of 10, and like I said, that's because I have very few complaints about the design of this game, and just the number of hours that I've been able to put into it already has given me so much enjoyment with the game. That can also be said about the other video game that I played in July. I had 10 hours into a game called Mini Motorways, which is the simplest of route connecting games where you have little houses popping up and you have, I guess, these workplaces popping up, and all you have to do is build roads to connect houses to workplaces so that you can get to those locations and get back home before those workplaces fill up with these pins that are popping up that disappear every time a new car arrives. And of course, as you grow out and expand your network, it gets ever more huge and convoluted until it finally all kind of blows up in your face. But here is the review that I wrote on Steam for Mini Motorways. My earliest games were ending quickly in extreme frustration. And then I discovered the pause button. And now I need to set aside at least 90 minutes if I want to get through a game, but at least I can do it at a relaxed pace now and achieve decent scores. This is an incredibly simple route building game, and the simplicity means it can feel quite samey from game to game, but what it does very well. And yes, the whole real-time aspect of it would be too much for me if it weren't for the fact that every time something new pops up on the map, you can pause the game, you can add new roadways, or you can adjust your layout to a certain extent, and then unpause to continue the game, and in that way it becomes much more relaxing, though still quite challenging as the game gets bigger and bigger. So I rate Mini Motorways an 8 out of 10 at this point. I really want to send out a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, who are the ones who allow me to actually purchase these games. The way it works is my Patreon money goes into my PayPal account. Whenever I see a video game pop up on the Steam sales and that I want to buy, I use that PayPal account to purchase new games, and so my Patreon supporters are directly funding my gaming purchases, and I'm really grateful for it. Moving on now to board games, and the first game was played during a camping trip. So my older son Evan asked me if I would take him and a bunch of his friends camping for a couple of nights. And I wanted to say no, because first of all, I really dislike camping. I mean, if I'm going to cosplay as anything, I would definitely not choose to cosplay as a person who is homeless. And the other thing is, I had a lot of misgivings about how things would go with a bunch of teen boys out at a campsite. So my heart said no, but because I will do literally anything for my kids, I said, yes, let's give it a shot and see how it goes. And it ended up being a bit of a failed experiment, unfortunately. None of the other parents wanted to come on the camping trip, so it was just me and all these teen boys. And it's no problem for me to get my boys to do things that they need to do. My boys are very respectful of me, and they're very considerate of others, thankfully. It's not so easy to get other people's kids to do things. In fact, if any teen is determined to have no respect for other campers at 1 in the morning on a campsite, there's apparently nothing you can say that can change that. So, yeah, I kind of want to say never again, but maybe if I took one of those boys in particular out, maybe I'd give it another shot. But there were a couple of highlights that did happen during the course of that time, however. One was this amazing storm that blew over at about midnight one night. And another fun moment was when we all got gathered together in the biggest tent and played a game of That Escalated Quickly with my son Evan and a bunch of his teenage friends. This is a very, very simple card-based party game that kind of straddles that line between activity and game, because yes, there is a win-loss condition, but the obvious purpose of the game is just to have fun and have some laughs. The general idea is they're putting out concepts and giving players secret numbers. The players have to come up with words that match the concept to the degree that their number is in hand. It's a little, I mean, I could take the time to explain it, but it's really quite a simple card-based game. It encourages creativity and laughs, and for that it works fine. It's certainly not the most fun or the best party game out there, but it's a solid 7 out of 10 for me. It was a fun time to play that one. Next up is one of the games that I pulled out because it's summertime and my boys are here, so I've had a chance to pull a couple games off the shelf that I haven't played in a long time and try them out with the kids to see what they think of them. One of these is a game called Manila, which is sort of like the game of craps in board game form, sort of. There's a lot more to the board game than to craps, although craps, I guess there's a lot of stuff going on there too, but it's kind of a gambling game that's based on dice rolling, and bidding is a big part of the game as well. The ultimate goal is to end up with the most money at the end of the game, and it's one that I have been wanting to play for a long time, so I did try it out, 3 players with my sons Evan and Wyatt. Now I have to add that I don't play this game properly. I play this game with very significant house rules that change up the harbor master bidding. So the central mechanism of Manila is this harbor master bid, where players have to bid their money, which is also their victory points, to become the harbor master each round, which has a huge amount of control over everything that happens for the round. What I've done with my little house rule here is divide up the tasks of the harbor master so that multiple players can do those tasks, so that essentially one single player isn't more or less playing out all the fun action of the round for each round. And it also takes away a certain amount of the importance of that bid as a result, so it does change the game significantly. So I'll have to throw that out because I didn't like that particular aspect of the game. And in fact, I ended up winning this game by a long shot without ever winning a single harbor master bid. And a big reason for that is because with any game that involves bidding or auctions, the very first time you play the game is usually very difficult because you just have no concept for the value of things or really how much you should be bidding for things. So I kept saying to the boys, you're bidding you're away your victory points. You know that. And they would increase their bid, and I would remind them, that's your victory points you're bidding to get the harbor master there. But anyways, the game works very well with 3 players. In fact, 3 players might be even the optimal number, because you get to place 4 workers every round instead of just 3, which means a little bit more action for each player each round. Evan liked it a fair bit. He ended up rating it an 8 out of 10. Wyatt, not as much. He gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Ultimately, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10, and in part because of another game that I'm going to talk about later, I've decided to put Manila on my for sale pile. It was one where I was debating whether or not I should hang on to it, and ultimately I realized if I have to house rule it to make it work for me, and if there are other games I have that do similar things but better, then there's no point in really hanging on to it. Next is another card-based party game that I talked about recently called Flip 7. This is a game that was all the rage. In the same way that Manila was possibly inspired a bit by craps, Flip 7 is clearly inspired by blackjack, where you're flipping cards, hoping to get big points without busting. It's a push-your-luck game. I'm always fond of the push-your-luck mechanism for whatever reason. There's something exciting about it, I guess. But this one I played with 4 players, with one of my brothers and 2 of his non-gaming friends. Now, of my 3 younger brothers, this is my one brother who's really not that much into gaming. So essentially I was playing with 3 other non-gamers, one of whom I had only hung out with one time before, and the other of whom I'd never met before, so his friends were essentially strangers to me. But my brother was having a very small get-together for his birthday, asked me to bring a couple of really simple things we could play to just have on the table as we hung out and chatted, something that was super simple, and it ended up being a decent way to pass some time, but nobody seems super excited by it. I'm realizing that for people who are not numbers oriented, and I will say that in general, the people I was playing with were the type of people who were highly skilled with words and with dealing with people, but had no interest whatsoever in anything mathematical or numbers related, because one of the guys in particular mentioned how he just wasn't worrying about the odds of certain numbers popping up, but was just kind of playing it by the seat of his pants. When I played it with my boys in the past, Evan had rated it a 7.5 and Wyatt had also rated it a 7.5, and I've come to the realization that they're probably pretty much bang on. I had previously rated it an 8.5 out of 10, but the more I play it, the less excited I am by it, and I've actually decreased my rating to a 7.5 out of 10. The second best game of the month is one that I actually played in June and then completely forgot to talk about for my video that I made for games played in June, so I've inserted it into my July games here. And this is a Gest of Robin Hood. This is a 2-player game that I had played a couple months back with my youngest brother, who, of my 3 younger brothers that I mentioned, is the biggest hobby gamer of the 3 of them. It's a sort of complex 2-player game where one player is playing as Robin Hood, the other player is playing as the Sheriff of Nottingham, trying to have control over the various regions around Nottingham. And when I had played it with my brother, I had played as Robin Hood and got absolutely smoked. I really didn't do very well as Robin Hood, but I was intrigued enough by the game to actually want to try it solo, which is an extremely rare thing for me. So I decided to play a solo game, and now this game does have a couple of hidden elements on either side, and so you would wonder how this could possibly work as a solo experience, and really all I had to do was make a couple of very small tweaks to the game, and it works super well as a solo game. And in fact, I should go to BoardGameGeek and to the Gest of Robin Hood forums, into the variant forums, and put my solo tweaks in there for anybody who's interested in playing it solo, because it ended up working pretty well. But I mean, here's how it went. So the game is divided up into 3 rounds, and then each round has several turns in it. By the end of round 1, the victory point marker was where it had started, so it had gone up a bit, down a bit, but it was back to even at the end of round 1. And I was playing both sides as best I could. I was playing both Robin Hood and obviously the Sheriff player, doing the best I could for both sides, but really hoping I could do better with Robin Hood than I did last time. However, by the end of round 2, I was at an instant loss for Robin Hood because I had done so poorly that the victory point track was all the way down on 8 points towards order, which means that you don't even play out round 3. It's impossible to come back from that much of a deficit. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have obviously not figured out how to play as a Robin Hood player still. But I wasn't ready to stop playing, so I decided to play out round 3 anyways, even though like I said, that instant loss condition had been met. And Robin Hood did pretty well in round 3. In fact, they gained 3 victory points back up on the track, but they still ended up 3 points back from the Robin Hood victory side of that tug of war victory point track, which kind of goes to show that the reason that instant loss is there is because once you're that far behind, even if you do super well in the 3rd round, you're really not getting back for the victory. And so, obviously, I really still have not figured out how to play as the Robin Hood player, and that's going to continue to puzzle me. I would love to get together with my brother again to play this again, because it's a really cool little game. In fact, my brother, when I played it with him, had rated it 9.5 out of 10, so he had thought very highly of the game. I had given it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a great game. It's not top tier for me, but certainly a fun experience. And then my last game is all about the fun. This is another one that I used my summertime time with the boys to pull out with Evan and Wyatt to play with the 3 of us, and this is Camel Up. This is another gambling game. So yeah, I'm teaching my kids how to gamble well this summer, because in this game we're betting on the horses. Well, you're not betting on the horses, you're actually betting on the outcome of a camel race, and quite a wacky, crazy camel race at that. The camels end up doing all kinds of wild things. The goal in this one, as with Manila, is to end up with the most money by the end of the game, and that is done through trying to bet on what is going to happen at various stages in the race, and ultimately which camel is going to win the race and which one's going to be in last place at the end. I play with the 2nd edition, which has a couple of camels that are moving backwards around the track and can in fact pick up camels and carry them backwards. So it adds even more to the chaos and the unpredictability, which might frustrate some people who want more control over what's happening, but I think it adds to the fun. And I forgot how quick this game is. It played very quickly. It was just a ton of fun. I ended up winning by a single coin over Evan, and Evan realized after the fact that if he had just done something different with his final action of the game, he would have been the definite winner. So he just missed something that would have prevented him from winning, so it was that close at the end. And once again, with this game, 3 players does seem like the optimal number because of the number of actions you get to do with only 3 players. 4 probably still would be pretty great, but this game suffers a lot from the more players you add to the game, the significantly fewer number of things you get to do throughout the game, and the less amount of control that you have over what happens. So I really would not want to play this game with more than 4. And like I said, 3 seems like a pretty ideal number. There's another game that's all the rage right now called Hot Streak that looks like a similarly chaotic betting on the outcome of a race that looks like it might be a great alternative for that 5 to 6 player range according to BoardGameGeek. And so it's one that I kind of have my eye on a bit, but I really enjoy Camel Up. Evan does too. He gave it an 8 out of 10. Wyatt enjoys this more than Manila. He rates it 7.5 out of 10. And I rate Camel Up an 8 out of 10 as well, as just a great, fun, quick playing experience. And that was it for my games played in July. What have you been playing? I would love to hear, whether it's video gaming or board gaming, what you've been getting into. Are there any games that have been particularly exciting you lately? Are there any upcoming titles that I should take a look at that might be really fun to check out? Please do get into the comments and let me know. And as always, I just really appreciate you being here and watching my video. Cheers. Okay. Here's what I wrote in my Steam review. Here's what I wrote for the review I posted on Steam for Thronefall. This is a combination of very simple gameplay plus an ever-increasing variety of weapons and perks as you work through the... This is what I wrote in the review I posted on Steam for Thronefall. A combination of very simple gameplay plus an And part of that, a game that is in the same way that Manila might have been inspired a bit by blackjack, Flip 7 is obviously inspired by, in the same way that a Robin Hood victory